The regular soldiers were the main force of the Nguyen Dynasty from the time of its establishment in 1802 until the reign of Tu Duc. After the Treaty of Sap Tan in 1884, the Nguyen Dynasty soldiers were merged with the colonial French army, and this existed until 1945. Today we will explore what some of the soldiers looked like in the 19th and 20th century through historical photos. Hue Review presents the soldiers of the last feudal dynasty of Vietnam. The army of the Nguyen Dynasty has the same organizational structure as the previous generation of soldiers. It included infantry, navy, cavalry, and artillery. This picture is of a Vietnamese soldier from 1877. This is an illustration of a soldier's weapons and uniform. Here is one of a palace servant, which might have lived in Hue. Soldiers in the capital are called the Ancient Guard. They are tasked with protecting Hue. Pictured here is the Hue Royal Guard at the coronation of Emperor Bao Dai in 1926. Here we can see some soldiers accompany Emperor Bao Dai during a ritualistic festival called Nam Zao. The man with the sword leads the parade, followed by the Royal Guard. These soldiers are cheering in unison. This picture was taken sometime in the early 20th century. A halberd and shield are clearly visible here. These are Royal Palace soldiers on the coronation day of Emperor Yi Dan in 1907. The guards and the retainers are in clear view. Featured here is Emperor Bao Dai with his servants carrying ornate fans to keep him comfortable during the ceremony. The team of soldiers in the foreground carefully transport the palanquin of Emperor Hai Ding, followed by men who carefully carry the robes. In the background, we can see rows of soldiers wearing white and supporting bayonets to protect the emperor. This was likely taken before 1925. These are Hue Palace guards during a break in the ceremony, taken sometime in the early 20th century. These old men are likely to be officers of the Royal Guard. They await the arrival of the emperor at the Nho Mon Gate, sometime in the early 1900s. This is a personal portrait of a finely dressed Vietnamese soldier wearing the uniform of the main armed forces of the French. At this time, it was very common for the French to use indigenous people as the bulk of the occupying army. Here is a good look at some Vietnamese colonial soldiers in Hanoi which have been armed and outfitted by the French. He appears to be holding a Fusil d'infanterie model 0715 Berthe rifle. Things are more difficult for the ethnic minorities from the Lao Cai region of Vietnam. These soldiers are barefoot, unlike the soldiers in the last picture from Hanoi. The uniform patterns in the 1920s to the 1940s were very diverse depending on the region. These soldiers are from the Vinh Long area. These men are border guards in the Mong Kai region, all wearing different uniforms. A combat uniform is shown on the right side, summer uniform in the middle, and a ceremonial white uniform is shown on the left. This is what the Royal Cavalry looked like in the early 19th and 20th century. Shown here, the Royal Cavalry awaits the Emperor to escort him to the ceremony in Hue. A horseman is shown here in his village. Up next is a photo of a court cavalryman in charge of communications from a province outside of Hue. This was taken in 1890. During the French colonial period, the French established cavalry teams which functioned as defenders of specific regions, tasked with helping both French and Vietnamese citizens. They would also be invited to holidays such as National France Day. Here we can see a French officer wearing a white pith helmet. He leads his Indo-Chinese soldiers in a cavalry training drill. In the 1800s, the Nguyen Dynasty still used elephants, as this drawing shows. The flag with the dragon is a common symbol of the Nguyen Dynasty. This is the procession of the emperor exiting the capital with his soldiers riding on elephants. The sight of elephants always drew a large crowd when these soldiers were out on parade. This is a drawing of one of the battleships constructed under the reign of Tu Duc, probably around the 1840s or 1850s. These two soldiers were assigned to guard the residence of a member of the royal court. The one on the left carries a weapon called a Tay Dao. The other one carries a spear. This was likely taken sometime between the 1910s and the 1930s. This is typical clothing for someone from the royal palace in Hue during the late 1800s or so. Here is the typical clothing one could expect to see soldiers in Hue wearing during that same time period. The man in this portrait is held in high regard by many Vietnamese people to this day for his fierce opposition to French encroachment on Vietnamese territory in the mid-1800s. Mr. Nguyen Tri Phương became a general and fought the French army many times between 1858 and 1873. He fought in Da Nang, Dai Dinh, and Hanoi before he was wounded. When he was captured, he refused to cooperate with the French and ended up dying from a hunger strike. This drawing here from 1880 depicts what Nguyen royals were wearing at about that time. Thank you very much for watching this. This video took me 9 hours to make, and I appreciate anyone with the patience and curiosity enough to watch this whole thing. Credit to my friend Miss Huang for helping me with some pronunciation, and credit for the footage goes to a channel called Huay Review. They have a longer video on this topic and many other history subjects in Vietnamese, so go check them out if you liked what you saw.